in the booth. It's time. Episode 210. All-Star break. Let's pick some All-Stars. It's time for Dingus.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Santiago Espinal that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs, joined as always by Robbie Baseball from the Murder Room. What's happening, Robbie?
So many things are happening, Ty. How are you?
I'm good, man. Life has been a little crazy, but we're hanging in there. That's a big reason why we haven't been able to record the last couple of weeks. Just been a little bit of life thrown at me full tilt. So I know you got to vacation a little bit with the family, which I'm sure was enjoyable.
It was excellent. We got to go to my hometown, Wawa, Ontario, not the convenience store or Petawawa, as every other Canadian just thinks, oh, you didn't say your hometown right. No, Wawa, between Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay on beautiful Lake Superior. And my wife was complaining how cold it was. And my son got mosquito bites on his face within 3 hours of arriving, and his forehead blew up like he got hit in the head with a fastball. So that was awkward introducing him to everybody the next 3 days. But no, it was awesome to go up. We stayed at a lodge that one of the guys I grew up playing hockey against, he was living down in Southern Ontario and living in Belmont outside London, moved back a year and a half ago. They've got an 8-cabin lodge up there. Catfish Lake. It was great. Let us use the boat. The kid caught a 24-inch pike. Nice. Blew his mind. Oh, it was so good. And got to spend time with friends who hadn't been back there in 6 years. Wow. Which was, so it was great to go back. And
you sound like Robinson Cano in the All-Star game.
I haven't been here, and so but no, it was great to do that, and that was one of the reasons why we hadn't recorded prior. And then when we had last scheduled, you and I, Ty, we had this small blip with a major communications company where they just stopped working, and then allegedly it was an update malfunction of some sort, right? And we may or may not each get $50 back for our minor for some and major inconveniences for others, business owners and what have you. And I mean, before that, you had some tragedy in your life. So
yeah, it's been busy. So we're back at it. We're talking baseball. We got home run derby. I mean, by the time we're done recording this, Julio Rodriguez will have like 400 home runs.
Yeah,
but we're
32
moving
the first round. Boom.
You know what's interesting? Like, I love the concept of the home run derby, but it has become not as enjoyable as it once was. I don't love the format. I miss the pressure cooker. Like, what I don't want to see is them go back to the guys taking borderline pitches, because it's a home run derby. Yeah. Like, learn how to hit, hit a ball to right field, maybe do those things. But the current format is just, it's like watching a 2-pitch softball tournament, right? Your own team's lobbing it into you, and can you or can you not do BP at a high level? Like, it's just not what it is. Like, give me some minor leaguers that come in and just throw gas, and your job is to hit they can only throw fastballs, and their job is to beat you and show you up on a big stage, and your job is to hit dingers off of minor leaguers. I think there's a real format there.
That would be very much like just making winning worth something, right? Which Major League Baseball eventually did. But
we'll get hats. I mean, it also make the home run derby great again.
Well, I saw someone post something online about a way to make baseball more interesting to the youth, and one of the things was after 9 innings you get one extra inning, and if you don't score in that extra inning, you go to a home run derby, kind of like the idea of the NHL shootout. The difference is that a shootout can be arranged pretty quickly in hockey and is actually entertaining.
Did you see that they actually announced this as the tiebreaker for the All-Star game? Did you see this today?
Oh no, I think that's why it got posted though. I think that was the relevance to it. Was like, what if this was the future? But I don't think that's a way that any any baseball fan wants it to go.
Not at
And
all.
if you're a fantasy player, you're always, it's like that double-edged sword, right? You're nervous for your players playing too much at the end of one day, or relievers getting a useless inning. But then on the other end, you're always happy to have extra at bats for your players. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, so we're not talking about changing baseball tonight. We're talking about celebrating some all-stars and then talking about some players who did not make it in our fantasy all-star selection. But before that, we got to do that thing we love to do.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Before I crack mine, I just want to show my level of preparation, Ty. I've got my container with an ice pack in it. So I've got a couple, but
I miss the window beers.
Yeah. Well, we just need more snow, and then I'll go back to the window beer. I shouldn't say more snow. We need snow, but yeah, cracking me a Busch Light because I did go through Merca twice, Ty, twice on the trip up to Wawa. You drive through, crossover in Sarnia or Port Huron on the U.S. side, drive up to Flint, take a look at Tropics Stadium, and then you start heading north on I-75. Yeah, but one thing I did go do is I went through Great Lakes Loon Country, minor pro ball team, and this hat right here is their third hat, their specialty hat. This is the Rally Camel for the Great Lakes Loons. Makes no sense to me, but I went into a Lids to purchase it in Birch Run, and I said, we walked up and it had a sign on the door that said closed for the day, and we were like, well, this sucks. The whole place was vacant. Michigan looked empty on our drive up, which was really weird. And then well, it was because I hadn't been up in a long time and it didn't look empty the last time. But on our way out, we were going to leave the Lid. It was an outdoor strip mall thing, and some guy came walking up and said, oh, like, do you work here? And he said, I do. I said, are you opening? Like, was it like went for dinner or whatever? He said, actually, a manager just randomly quit this morning and gave the keys to a security guard and locked up. So he was going in to like find out what had happened. And I'm like, do you mind if I buy a hat? So, I said, I see the hat I want, which was the Great Lakes Loon regular hat, which is a loon with the L, like a classic thing. And I said, what's this one? And he said, oh, that's their third helmet. And then he like gave me a like 2-minute little info session on him. Like, well, that's the one for me. So I sunk the bucks into this bad boy, and I love it. So anyway, then we went to Cabela's to continue that, and both my kid and I got $5 Cabela's hats. And nice. He looks cute as a button in his. They're the ball cap. They just say Cabela's on the front with the mesh on the back, the trucker style. But the kid's got dynamite blue eyes. He's got blue steel going on, and
there you go.
He looks great in his. But anyway, I said my beer, Busch Light. What are you drinking?
I just finished the Woodford that has been several episodes deep here. I do have a couple extra bottles. I restocked. I also went to the States. I did Miami and San Antonio on a recent road trip. And I picked up the Elijah Craig restock. So that was always nice. It's always a good move. That's a good bottle. But let's talk All-Stars though, Robbie. I know we maybe have a couple things that we want to touch on here before. I think briefly. Soto, I think maybe the obvious spot to start. Like, where's Soto going to end up? Is this all a ploy? Is he just going to be a national? What do you think?
Well, the guy in your fantasy league, and I mean, we've got him in our home league, who's like, I'm putting Trout on the block. Send your offers. And the only thing he wants, especially if it's a keeper league, he's got his one keeper of Trout who's finally healthy and doing Trout things. And he wants 4 of your best keepers. And if you're not willing to make that deal initially, he's saying, quit trying to jip me, and ends the conversation. That's Washington right now. Who in the hell is going to pony up what Soto's actually worth and then pay him what, $500 million over the next 12 or 15 years or whatever Soto wants? I think those teams are going to need to wait, or Washington is going to need to really, really reduce their like actual talent that they can receive back in a Soto trade. Because I don't think there's a team out there who's like, you know what I'll do? like the Yankees with Stanton, that contract was in place. That made it a little easier to do. You don't have Soto's contract in place. So I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think you can do that. But I mean, how could 29 teams not line up?
Yeah,
And
I
just
mean,
say,
everybody
what would
should
it
be
take,
listening.
right?
Yeah. Everyone should be listening.
Imagine Baltimore, right? Baltimore is kind of turning the corner. They've been a lot better the last month. Their division, the AL Beast, is back. And if you
Can
wanted
you
to make an
imagine Soto
insane
with that
move,
right field porch? Oh my
well,
goodness.
put Soto in a lineup where there are emerging talented players at all positions and some pretty solid guys at others that are all inside their like second full pro year. Ramon Urias is back from injury. He's been pretty good. There are other players who are also just chugging along. And then you've got a guy like Jorge Mateo, who, although the stats are wonky, a lot of stolen bases, the average is just over 200. They contribute to your MLB team. And that would be a good thing. I thought Washington was going to be so much better this year. I think maybe I thought they would just compete as create more runs, and it's not happening. But if you were to move Soto to, I don't know, what's the best park? We can't, we could all say Coors, but
Baltimore, Yankee Stadium, those are the two that come to mind, right? Like the short porches just make sense. I mean, here's a thought though, and this is probably never going to happen, but I'm going to throw it out there. Judge leaves Yankee Stadium, Soto comes in. Is that a remote possibility? Like, Yankees fans have to be concerned with no contract for Judge yet. Like, I don't know how the Yankees let him leave, but how do you, if you can say, I'm going to get 2 years of Soto, get him here, get him comfortable, and then lock Soto up at age 26 versus an absolute giant of a human at 29. It makes a ton of sense. Like, I hate to say it as a Jays fan, but it's a thing. It could happen very easily.
It sucks.
Right.
And then there are there's Volpe.
They've got the assets. Luis Gil could go.
Yeah.
Right.
You've got
guys that could go
still there. There are players that could go into Washington and be part of that churn, right?
100%.
I don't like the idea that we just made Soto to the Yankees a possibility.
100%. It makes 100% sense, and it makes more sense there than it makes in almost every other spot. So it's terrifying, but it's a very real possibility.
Okay, well, let's move off that because that's now I'm depressed. Now I'm depressed on that. Some fun news, Ty. The next Ohtani was drafted by the Angels, nonetheless. That's right. Zach Neto, we'll find out for sure. 21-year-old shortstop / relief pitcher out of Campbell University. And we'll save the rest, the details of that, for a future episode where we're going to go through it with our good friend Mason McRae, who you can find at Twitter at Mason_MCRAE, Mason McRae. Don't forget, you can always find us at Dingers Podcast on Twitter, you can find the podcast at Dingers Pod on Twitter. You can find Ty at Tourney Boss or myself at Robbie Baseball 1, the numerical number 1, as my friend Michael Govier had to say on a couple of the podcasts that I did guest spots on with him, including the Palazzo Pals, which I tried to let him know that he can't say 2 L's, 2 Z's. Once he lives in Canada, it's going to be 2 L's, 2 Z's. And then I was also on his movie podcast, which was a delight. And we covered the Fast and Furious, the original, which I also have behind me in DVD format. That was good fun. Govier is a great guy. So anyway, the future episode with the draft recap, which is still going on now. And then Ty, the final one is kind of an interesting one. I mean, we got to see it firsthand. I don't want to get too deep into the homer out part of this, but the Jays have struggled. They removed their manager, Montoyo. It was just about a year too late, I think, from when he should have been canned. But they made it happen. And then we saw Philly come in missing 2 impact players, 4 MLB players, though. And on your 26-man roster, you never want to lose 4 for any reason, injury or otherwise. But 4 healthy players were not able to come due to the vaccination requirements in Canada, which, just so we're clear, there are also vaccination requirements within places in America. So it goes both ways, going to and coming back. So, but because Philly only had to do the 2 games, those guys didn't have it. But then KC came into town with most of their AAA club because 10 Royals either opted out, were demoted before the All-Star break,
and got better.
Yeah, and
They
all of a
got
sudden,
better.
KC was this competitive team, and Toronto, who was also on the snide, having their teeth kicked in by Oakland and Seattle out west, came back home and now has this like 5 out of 6. It looks better than it is thing going after the All-Star break. We'll see what happens, but Ty, I'm curious what your thoughts are. If you think there's going to be a little bit more of this in the second half, I don't know exactly what teams have and have not come to Toronto, but I know Boston and New York are both coming back, and both of those teams are missing players. Red Sox fans were saying, "Oh, Hoke missing. Now he's their closer, right? He was supposed to be one of their new starters 2 years ago, and now he's their closer. Just like Garrett Whitlock was supposed to be a closer for this year, then he's a starter, a good one, gets hurt. Now we'll see what happens. He's off the IL.
He's going back in the pen.
Well, that's what I suspect. They've only got 4 veteran dudes that could be starting.
Sale injury might change that, though.
Yeah, we do. At least the benefit of this is that whenever someone's listening to this in podcast form, there might be a little bit more clarity on that situation. But do you think that this could, and I'm going to say, give Toronto a better chance at winning, not give them wins. But when they win 5 out of 6 against a subpar KC team and a Philly team that really needed 2 wins, do you think that we could see a little bit more of this and that might make Toronto look good? Although I think we all know they're not, and the rotation has just been atrocious the last 6 weeks plus.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the rotation turned the corner a little bit in the last 5 or 6 games. Like, I know before that it was terrible. Gosman looks better. Stripling's still looking good. Manoah looks like Manoah, right? So there's your 3. Like, Barrios' hook's starting to come around. Like, it's still been a little spotty the last couple, but like, I think 3 of the last 4, he's looked sharp. So I think the rotation's going to be okay. We still need a 5th starter. We still got to go get somebody in the trade market. But the offense for me, like it comes down to Vlad. Like, Vlad's the guy that makes everybody else go. And so until he gets squared away, and he looks awful right now.
Yeah, he's not elite. He's really, really good, because that's what Vlad is on a bad day, is really good. But he's not Soto controlling the strike zone, he's not doing what we saw for long stretches last year.
He's swinging at pitches away like he's a rookie again. That's what he looks like. And, for me, there needs to be some of the stuff that fell on Montoya and got fired on the hitting coach, because he's not the only one with a poor approach at the plate right now. You're seeing, guys like Gurriel and Teoscar come out of their little slump. So, Bo hasn't been as bad as people think over the last stretch. He's had bad games, but, he's been – so I think they're going to be fine, honestly. I still think we're a starting pitcher away and probably a reliever away from where we need to be. But I think that's something we can go get in the trade market, and I think we will.
Okay, well, we'll have to watch that situation, because some people are starting to get a little heated about the whole, vaccination status stuff when it's coming to teams visiting. But,
Toronto's dealt with it for 2 years. So,
well, yeah, it also affects them for players that they look to add, right? They just can't add a guy who refuses to be vaccinated. And that's something that I think other teams or other fans, I should say, are forgetting, that's an entire aspect. Free agency is included.
And you hinted at it earlier, but the entire Jays roster has to be vaccinated to go across the border back and forth, right? So they don't get a choice, or they don't play baseball, right? So the fans can be mad all they want, but like, Toronto's been at a deficit for the last 2 years and barely said anything about it. So suck it up and figure it out.
Yeah. So something else that we're going to be leading into is we're getting closer to MLB trade season. Our players that need a new organization. We talked about it before. Guys like Jose Siri, who were not getting playing time and then sent down. Now they're back up. Garrett Hampson, Bobby Bradley, Joe Adell, Luis Castillo, Frankie Montas, Vidal Brujan are all players that we think would be better served in other organizations. Adding to that list now, Ty, and we will have to be adding more up until the trade deadline. Tyler Mahle with Cincinnati. Because the funny thing with him is that 2 years ago, Cincinnati had the guru pitching coach and everything was going to get better, and it didn't. But it was going to, but they just can't. They can't do what Colorado pitchers try to do, which is work to the park that they have. So Cincinnati pitchers apparently are all all-stars. They just need to get out of town. Then we've got Benintendi with KC. He needs a new place. Rumors are possibly back to the AL East with Boston or the Red Sox. I couldn't imagine the Red Sox trading to get him back. Like, I don't know, man. Like, he was almost booed out of town. People were so pissed at him. Red Sox fans wanting greatness when that's not what Benny is. Then we've got Whit Merrifield also with KC. It might be time. I don't know if this is his third or his fourth year in that 4-year extension he signed. But this might be the time for KC to actually clear him out. Depending on how they feel about guys like Emmanuel Rivera. And now that they've just played 10 of their AAA dudes, there might be they got a little bit of a window right before the All-Star break to see what they can do. Brad Keller, once upon a time, Rule 5 darling of mine. He's playing pretty decent baseball. KC is moving guys in and out of that rotation and not having a lot of success. Keller might get a return that warrants a trade. Now that's not like like the next couple guys like Mad Bomb. You would love to see Mad Bomb would love to be on a winning competitive team. Arizona is not that. I don't think you can really move him without eating a lot of that contract. Plus he probably doesn't want to go because he's got a 5-team no trade clause, which we all know is going to be basically the rest of the AL West outside of Colorado. And then I don't know, the Mets and the Yankees, something like that, right? It's going to be a little harder to make a deal with him work. Walker with Arizona, I don't know. He's kind of 3 true outcome for me. Not a huge fan, but again, we're going to start to see that heat up. And then Jose Quintana, who from the time he signed, even in the offseason, Ty, you were saying this is a trade candidate for Pittsburgh to get assets. Well, he's definitely going to be able to help Pittsburgh cash in on that. It's a matter of what they get back in return.
Yep, I agree. I mean, he's going to be relatively cheap. I think Pittsburgh knows that. Like they want maybe a lottery ticket and somebody that's further away, but lots of good candidates here. We're going to see more, right? There's more obvious ones. There's some less obvious ones. I like what Merrifield to move. I think he's a National League guy through and through. I think that's where he ends up somewhere over there, but it'll be interesting, right? We've got some big names that we know about on the pitching side for sure. But we'll get into it. Guys that you're always trying to get to when you make these trades are all-stars. So let's segue into that, Robbie.
Absolutely. So tonight we're going to break down fantasy all-stars as well as the fantasy not stars, which are the guys that we expected to be producing at a high level and they're not. So what I tried to do here, Ty, was I looked at 5x5, 8x8 and points leagues. And my God, when you have a very simple idea of I'm going to take the top 10 players and eliminate them and then try to work an average. And if you've ever watched Criminal Minds, you'll hear them talk about cross-referencing. Yeah. I cross-reference this with that. It's not that easy, So when you get into points and then you look at like predictions and ADPs and you go to Fantasy Pros to see where was this catcher taken off the board and where was this outfielder, all that becomes a whole bunch of work I didn't think I was going to be doing. But I think the list I've come up with is pretty good. Some of the guys are legit all-stars. They're at the all-star game now. And some of the guys are just really helping out your fantasy team. And the expectation was that they would be helping, or in the case of a couple guys, there was no expectation. So when we lead off with catchers, we had the 12th catcher off the board in redraft. For Dynasty, he was a top 10 guy, but he wasn't a top 5. And that's Alejandro Kirk with Toronto. 236 overall ADP through Fantasy Pros, which has all the places. But I mean, we're a Dynasty podcast. I'm just using that for reference so everybody gets the idea. But a 12th catcher headed into 2022, and he's been really good offensively for Toronto, but it wasn't a hot start. It has been consistency after April for Kirk, and I think that's been the case that we'll probably see with half a dozen guys here today. And then the other guy is Jonah Heim with Texas, whose ADP, I mean, there was no dynasty value for him, so we can't pretend that there was. His ADP through Fantasy Pros was 563. So that's basically fly around or not drafted, 50 player draft and hold, that kind of crappy fantasy. So really no value to him. And he's been a serviceable catcher throughout the first half. So those are the catchers. Now there are guys on the other side that we'll get to soon, Ty. But do you have anything on Kirk or Jonah?
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to anybody up here that watched Kirk play closely for the last couple of years, like you knew he was going to break out. Like I think all of us that are Jays fans knew what we had with Kirk, and we tried to convince other people that this short, stubby little guy was going to be dynamite.
He's got an eye,
and he has been. I'm going to give you props on Jonah Heim because you've been on him for a couple of years now, and although he's not a prominent dynasty catcher, we have talked about like you don't need to spend a lot on catcher, and you've targeted him for a while. So, kudos to you for being like 2 years early on Heim.
Well, I was just going to say that's like the Austin Nola was kind of my guy headed into last year, and it was injury. So I held my position into this year. And it's just, I mean, thankful for Jorge Alfaro being a good player too. It's made it hard for any one catcher in San Diego to just take a job. But, Heim came in and we talked about it. No, there was no catcher in Texas. It was wide open. There was Pozo off the 40 man. And I can't remember exactly who else was in contention with Heim. And there was a
Huff would be
possibility.
another one that's still
Sam
there.
Huff was Sam Huff was the prospect to come up and take the job. But as we all know, you cannot pencil in a prospect catcher to come up and take the job. Even in Toronto, Gabriel Moreno has come up. He's looked okay, and he's proven that he's not ready yet. But Toronto has this stupid 3 catcher thing. Maybe it's gone with Montoyo now, but it could be delaying Moreno a little bit too.
Well, I mean, Moreno's got to be on the trade block. I mean, I think he has to be. That's my thoughts.
If you want Barrios trade last year was your 2 best prospects. I think that's what Toronto did, right? They're 1 and 2. And Manoah was up at that point in time. So, and Nate Pearson, we don't know what the heck's going on with him. But if Toronto wants to make a big move, and we're going to have to get off Toronto, it's been a lot. But hey, we just mentioned a J player. It could be a Moreno move because you still, for whatever reason, they still really think Danny Jansen is there, and they still have Collins, who I guess can hit home runs. So, but if we move to first base, all stars, Ty, let's give the floor to you here because this is one of your boys.
This is my guy, probably my all-time favorite fantasy player, if not Manny Machado. It's Paul Goldschmidt. This is a guy that I had little doubt, and I said it 2 years ago, Robbie, when he was slumping. Yep. Do not give up on Paul Goldschmidt. He is a hitter. He will be fine. And guess what? He's fine. And if not, he's the NL MVP, if you ask me right now. And I don't even think it's close.
Crazy average. He came into the year as, I think, the 4th ranked first baseman, and he's number 1 right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is he number 1 overall right now on Yahoo? I don't know.
No, Judge is number 1.
Anyway, but he's been very, very good, and we all know that. And I mean, no one's really shocked. But I think it's just a matter of listen, everyone had started to, clear the bar a little bit on Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah, and dynasty owners were looking to move on, and it wasn't time. Yeah. And you said it, Ty. You were very clear in the not yet. Look at how 1B has magically thinned out from being a very stacked position. Goldie was one of the few guys that could offer stolen bases. That's what made him special. Now it's the other 4 categories he's all crushing in. And not that he doesn't steal bases. He's still throwing a few out there.
And he's in a stacked lineup that's only going to get better. That's the crazy part. Right. That lineup is gross, and it's going to get better. It's hard to imagine, but it's still there's a corner outfield position up for grabs. Carlson looks like he's slowly maybe taking that back, but there's guys coming. So, we saw the 100-mile-an-hour shortstop throw in the Futures game on Sunday. Totally unnecessary, but awesome at the same time.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like, okay, so he threw it that hard. Cool. He had him if he'd just done a nice toss as well. But I get it. You whop it back in an 8x8 tie. Just so you know, Goldschmidt is the 2nd overall player, and that's with the last week of his being probably the worst of his season with a 208, 602 OPS. But for the year, 1,004 OPS, 330 average. He is better than 2-1 strikeout to walk, 5 steals, 20 dingers, 70 RBIs, 64 runs.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
and the other guy at the first base is a guy that I think also had a good rebound, and he was strong last year. He's stronger this year. Definitely a trade candidate coming out of Washington is Josh Bell. He had 128 on the ADP. He's 19th in the first base slot. This is a guy that also people were like, you know what? He's had a couple bad years here or there. He's not a guy switch hitter. He's never going to hit 40 home runs. It's just not his thing. But 25 to 30, you can pretty much kind of expect when he's got some protection. He's got to move, has to move. There has to be a full tilt fire sale here for Washington. They already started it last year. So this is an obvious trade candidate. And I think this is an AL East guy, Robbie. I think there's a couple teams in the AL East that could come get Josh Bell. I think he's a good fit with the switch hitting. Between Boston and New York, you've got options for some home runs. Baltimore, toss that in there. So the left-handed, right-handed stick play, very valuable in the AL East. So I think that's an obvious destination. I don't know which team's going to come get him, but I think there's 3 that could very easily make that move. Tampa, Toronto, and Boston all could come to play for that one.
Well, I would say Tampa should be first in line because I forget who it was that I was looking at that had played the most bases or the most games at first base for Tampa Bay, and I was like, oh,
Harold Ramirez.
Yeah, is that who had played the most or had played a bunch? Because Ramirez has been
He
good
played a
lately.
bunch, and he's terrible at first base too.
Yeah, they need a legit
Just
first
awful.
baseman. And right now, it's the more categories you play in, the more valuable Josh Bell becomes. So
Yeah.
he's 16th overall in 8x8. His OPS this year is 894, 311 average, which is 50 points up on last year. That's the big bump for him right now. But he still has 53 strikeouts to 42 walks. So he's getting you, he's not crushing you in walks, and he's doing, in strikeouts. He's doing very well in walks. No stolen bases, but he never has been that guy. 49 runs on a crappy Washington team, 50 RBIs on a crappy Washington team. And to Ty's point, 13 dingers on the year has him on pace to be somewhere in the mid 20s. First base is not bad. Second base, very, very ugly. So we got another Cardinal here. Now I can't remember. Were you a Tommy Edman guy preseason or yeah? Okay.
Well, I mean, for me, it was I'm you know how I draft. I'm always an opportunity guy. So Edman had a bit of an advanced ADP coming into the season. A lot of people had bumped him up. And then by the time we got into draft season, because most of the leagues we're in, we're drafting late. And so when we got into draft season, there was this lull of like, oh, Edman's being overdrafted, this and that. So he was starting to slip, and he almost got too far in multiple leagues. So I'm happy to take him. But like, if you give me a guy that's going to steal a bunch of bases, hit a few home runs, and hit for average, like I'm a power strikeout guy on my big sticks. So if I can balance that with like my home league team, Robbie, like I've got the big bats, and then I've got McNeil and Luis Ariz, right? So you pick Edman in that same kind of cut of cloth. Like I like to offset those kind of skill sets together. So yeah, I didn't get Edman in a ton of leagues. I think I got him in 2, but I'm definitely a Tommy Edman guy because I like the versatility. I like the hit tool, and it plays up on the power side, you know, for the simple skill set.
And the overall drop in average across MLB that everybody was crying over in April and May, I mean, myself included, I expected higher averages from guys, played into Tommy Edman's hand because his 262 average from 2021 was not tantalizing because that was right around league average. Well, he's 259 this year, which is now above league average, and his 699 OPS above league average, plus the fact he's got 20 stolen bases at the All-Star break. Last year, he had 30 for the year. It's making him a really attractive guy, and he's got 1 million at bats. 363 could be leading MLB. I'm really not sure. Certainly the most I've seen in some of the research I've been doing. And just so everyone's aware, when we get to the in continuing with the positive guys as well as getting into the negatives, if players missed time with injury outside the minimum IL, they're off. We're not including players who are injured because that's not performance related why they miss. So if you're like, well, Ryu's been a disappointment, and you know, name your other DeGrom and whomever else, well, those guys are injured, so we're not here to crap on someone who has had a health concern. We're here for performance. And one of the other guys who has been performancing very well, thank you for using technical terms, has been Espinal with Toronto. And it's interesting to see that old Santiago inside the top 300 overall for 8x8, still on Yahoo, only 35% rostered. But after being at the All-Star game, I'm assuming he's going to go up for the year. Ty, 711 OPS, 271 average, 6 dingers, 5 stolen bases, doing okay on strikeout to walk ratio. He's better than 2 to 1. No, he's right around 2 to 1 in that. And 37 RBIs, 33 runs, batting at the back of the lineup most of the time. But Toronto was jumping guys around, and he was middle of the order for a little bit too. It's been a surprise season for him since the expectation was that they weren't going to need him. You know, it was going to be Biggio or bust kind of. And he came in and really helped out early on and earned it. But Espinal made our fantasy all-star team because 77th second baseman off the board on Fantasy Pros and 574th ADP. That earns you an all-star bid when you're a top 300 player.
Well, and I mean, the reality is like he put on weight in the offseason, right? There was some, you know, positives
as we all
coming
do.
in. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I mean, apparently it was like all that one of those like pounds of muscles thing, which we know less about.
I don't follow that.
My big concern here, and it's the concern I've had for him for a while, like on the season, the OPS is 711, right? So for your convenience, though, the last month it's been 572. And that's always been the knock on Espinal. It's not the hit tool, it's not the defense, it's the empty average. And that's showing its face. Like the way I was kind of thought about it when I saw our prep notes for this, and I'm like, what can I say about Espinal? And I said it's going to be really disappointing to Espinal owners when he's benched behind Biggio down the stretch. And that is going to be hard for Espinal owners if you're not prepared ahead of your trade deadline to have a different starting second baseman, because he is not going to play in your playoffs. Like, he might have some at-bats, right? He's going to get pinch hit at-bats. He's going to be defensive replacement. Like, there's going to be at-bats, but I'm telling you right now, his bats will shrink down the stretch. That's a fact.
Well, in your show note on it, your comment was "ew." That's what you wrote in. But that's also that's also the state of second base right now for fantasy, because there are guys who are supposed to be doing good things who are, and they're not the ones who we would say are all-stars. They, if anything, would just be your legacy guys. You've got a guy who is doing better than everyone expected, and he's overall genuinely being a positive asset to your fantasy team. Well, on second base, that makes you an all-star right now. The shortstops, it's more of a rebound year for Lindor. He's making the all-star team because he was the 9th shortstop off the board, 51st ADP, and he's having a fine year. And then Dansby Swanson, who, World Series champion, he was 19th shortstop off the board and 118th ADP. Also, both Lindor, I think Lindor was 9th in dynasty rankings, our dynasty rankings. I can't confirm that at this moment. And Swanson was in between the 10 and 14 mark, somewhere in that realm, both far exceeding that. They both get all-star nods for us. Of course, there are shortstops who are doing great things, but we're talking about the ones who are supposed to be doing one thing and they're exceeding that expectation. If you're going to tell me Trey Turner should be on this list, well, yeah, no guff. You're not going to hear us say Acuna or Soto either, because they're doing what is expected. You wouldn't say a top 10 player should be on fantasy all-star list. They should always be. Of course they should be. They would be on the list below, if like the list of why are they not there. So, but that also brings me into the next guy, Ty, at third base. We've got also World Series champion Austin Riley, who is doing really good, had a good year last year, but has been even better this year. He was 43rd in ADP and he was the 4th third baseman off the board this year, and he's exceeded even those draft positions and dynasty rankings. Austin Riley is studying out right now. And recently I made a trade inquiry for Corbin Burns for Austin Riley straight up, and it was declined. And I thought, man, if that gets offered back again, like if the wishes he had accepted it, I would not make that deal right now, because Austin Riley can help you out depending on your category spread. Of course, he can help you out in a lot of places, but if you're counting strikeouts, that's the one knock on Riley, that you got to watch for that slump. If he's not producing with his power, he's going to be racking up Ks, and him and Schwarber in the home league were hurting me earlier this year with that.
Yeah, but if you're getting 50 home runs out of those two guys, who cares?
You trade it off.
That's the reality. It's definitely one of those things that there's lots of room for improvement here. And ultimately, the strikeouts is really the only thing that you can hit. Like, for me, I had him as taking a baby step back and was wrong. And I'm glad I'm wrong, because I like Riley. We were in on Riley before most people. So I'm happy to see that he proved me wrong on the recoil.
He was one of those guys, Ty, that after he came up and did not smash the doors, people really recoiled on and were like, Austin Riley, that prospect fatigue immediately set in. Oh, he came up and he tripped. I don't want him anymore. And he was a player available.
But it's like Matt Chapman right now. Like, if you watch Matt Chapman play versus Matt Chapman's statistics, like, you're going to have a very different opinion. Like Matt Chapman is hitting the ball hard everywhere right now. He's just hitting it right into gloves all over the field. And that's what tipped it off for me, Robbie. If you remember back in the National League Championship against the Dodgers in 2020, like, he did the same thing. He was hitting the ball hard everywhere and just getting no production of it. That happens. That's how baseball works. I'm experiencing that with my over 30 men's league cubbies. I finally got the OPS over 800 again.
There you go.
I hit a home run into the wind yesterday, settled for a double. So it probably would have left with no win.
So your exit velo was high, but the park factors brought the ball back in.
Well, I hit it to like
your
the
advanced
absolute
stat moment.
I hit it to the deepest part of the park, and in a 30 over 30 league, you can't do that. It's got to be to the short spot. So I got it pretty good. I hit it to the wrong spot on the wrong day. And so, but that's what's happened to Austin Riley in a lot of cases. And the strikeouts are going to be there when you're hitting for power. Like, that's just a thing. So there's very few guys that can eliminate that from their game. Those guys are superstars.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
So
when Josh Donaldson was hitting a billion, he was still striking out a ton. He was just also walking. All right. That's the X factor. Is it, if you're counting walks and you're counting strikeouts, it really one mutes the other. Plus, as you had alluded to, Ty, the power. Now, the next guy here, the third base all-star, and I had to put him at third base because that's where he's played the most of this year, but he's first, second, and third base eligible in Yahoo. I believe it might also extend to some Fantrax leagues, depending, because last year he only got 84 at bats, but they were pretty good in Colorado. Then he turned up in Cincinnati, and Brandon Drury has been doing great things in 309 at bats, 278 average, 864 OPS, 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio is not ideal, but that's, that again, league settings, 2 stolen bases, 18 dingers. Holy crap. Thank you. Great American Ballpark, 56 runs and 52 RBIs. And that's on a team that was historically brutal in April. And I don't know if they have the lowest win total of any team in Reds history, but there was something where there was some of that, like they were on the cusp of record setting bad. But Brandon Drury, not part of that. He might be on that team temporarily. But he has been having one heck of a year. And it does, as I said, he was doing fine last year in Colorado before he got hurt. So there could be a bit of run here. Now, I know you wanted me to put Machado here. I just explained that great players are supposed to be great, and Machado has been this year, so he's not getting rewarded because I think he was the third highest drafted third baseman. So, Brandon, let's give it to Drury for the All-Star nod.
Yeah, I agree. The outfield is a fun list here. I'm going to lead off with your boy, Connor Joe. Yeah, see what I did there? See what I did
boy. Well, there are several of my boys here.
I just knew you weren't expecting Connor Joe. Connor Joe has been, a blessing for anybody that got him late in drafts. I mean, I think he was one of those favorite sleepers coming into this year, had a good finish last year, and has kind of continued on that. Thank you, Garrett Hampson, for not stealing the job kind of thing. And, ultimately opened up Connor Joe for some success here. Like, anything you're worried about with Connor Joe down the stretch here? Like, I know for me, there's a couple guys in this group that I think are going to have a little bit of a recoil on the second half, but what are you thinking?
Well, the fact that Connor Joe hasn't lit it up, but he's been consistent, and he's also moved around, and Colorado's playing him. He's got eligibility right now at left field, right field, and first base. And I think he is 7 or 8 games away, I believe, in right field for gaining 20 starts there, or 20 appearances. So he very well, depending on your outfield, like if you do left, right, and center in your league versus just generic outfield, he could be eligible in 3 positions for 2023 before we even hit September, when more players get shuffled around. So I love that versatility factor headed into the future. But he's also just become a major league player. And we talked about on an earlier episode, which I mean now was over a month ago, about players who just are major leaguers now. We weren't sure what they were going to be, and some of them had settled into that role. Well, Connor Joe, I think, has just turned into a versatile Colorado Rocky. And I mean, he was a Rule 5 guy who was picked, returned, traded, moved, whatever. Like he has seen it. He has been around, and he's settled in with Colorado, which is great, because they are not very likely going to move him, because he's an asset to their team. And I don't see who is going to come in and take away that playing time. He's moved over to first base when Cron's DH or needed time off or whatever. I think he's in Colorado, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah, I would agree. The guy on the top of the list here that I baited you on, Julio Rodriguez, has been awesome. I don't think anyone's surprised that he makes this list. The guy is a friggin' superstar, as we mentioned earlier. He's going off in the home run derby tonight. But this is not a shocking one. The only thing I want to flag here is this is a rookie, going to play a full season. Like, these are the guys that always concern me in playoff times, right? You ride them, and then they get cold at the wrong time for you, right? So just a flag. Like, now this guy's better than most, right? So this is not, a for sure conclusion. Every player has the ability to break through that, but there's enough historical data that suggests a rookie down the stretch will get tired. So that's just the way it is, especially a guy that's playing every day, running, doing all the things that he does in center field. Like there's a lot that could, push him towards that direction. So Robbie, are you concerned about that at all? Or are you just laying down the house for him?
The only reason I'm not concerned about that is because Seattle's playing really well right now. Now they did not start out well. They did not play great in May, but right now they are. And that's exactly what they need to do, so that they are thinking about October baseball, so that when us fantasy players are in our September playoffs, Julio will be in the lineup. He will not be getting sat. They will find out the ideal matchups if there's ever a time to sit a guy like that. I don't think it's in September. I think you could see him taking some time in August. They could try to ease him in here and there, but it also depends on the health of guys like Kyle Lewis. Because if Kyle Lewis comes back and is doing what he's been doing at AAA, holy crap, Seattle is all of a sudden going to have depth that they have yet to have this year. And then they're going to be in this position that I had originally thought they were going to be in, which was a team that didn't need to acquire talent because they had so much. That might mean Julio Rodriguez would be subbed out in games or other things if he was older. I don't know that they're going to do that right now. I think they might just let him go. And the one nice thing is that he's not, just stealing bases. He's not just hitting for power. He's a two-stroke change the approach type guy. He's a ball player through and through. And I think that's going to be good for the rest of this year. But to your point, Ty, there could be adjustments made, severe adjustments made, especially within the division and how they play them come 2023, where if there's a slow start or something like that, if there's ever going to be a time to get Julio Rodriguez, it is more than likely going to be, the second half of April next year if there's a slow start and you got an antsy owner in your league, versus trying to pick him up, like you said, where he could end up with a bit of a dip in September because he's played so much baseball.
Yeah. And hot news just off the press, Julio Rodriguez just took down the Derby champ Pete Alonso in the semifinals. So just live updates here. But the reality is I think that's real. Mitch Haniger coming back also could play a part in the conversation that you just
definitely
had. Lots going on there. Next on the list, Kyle Schwarber just doing his thing. Questionable batting average, a little bit of walks, a lot of home runs. We're not really shocked, I don't think, that the home run totals are there. I'm a little shocked that they're as high as they are. Like, I didn't expect him to be that far up at this stage in the game, especially given the struggles that Philly has had. Like, every time I see his stat line, I'm like, wait a second, how does he have that many?
29 dingers, 208 average, 820 OPS. So if you look at 208 and 820, you're like, okay, so like, what would that be? Joey Gallo, that would not be something that is great. And then the last month, his average was 194. Last 2 weeks, it was 170. Last week, it was decimal 04. Like, this is your hot and cold guy. He had one hit last week. Hey, it was a home run. He is very Stanton-esque, but over the last 2 weeks, he's had 6. And over the last month, he's had 11 dingers. Like, he's providing you with one thing consistently. It's hitting at the right time that can make the difference with Schwarber.
He's 2-1 K to walks. However, he has 120 strikeouts basically, right? Like,
right.
He's over 2-1, but you get the point. Like, he does have walks to go with that. Like that, if you're in a category league, like you'll take 60, 62, 29, 58, 52, right? Like you'll take that all day, every day, right?
Yeah,
that plays.
He's absolutely helping. And his ADP was 102. He was the 29th rated outfielder off the board. And right now he's 44th in 8x8 and obviously rostered everywhere. It's just a matter of, in points leagues, that's probably where he's the best because you're not taking average into account. But it doesn't matter. The guy's a beast. He's just a pure beast. So the next guy up here is somebody who, a little bit of a debate on overall, but I'm giving Christian Yelich the all-star nod. 94th overall right now. Ty felt it should have been Yordan Alvarez, but I would argue that Yordan Alvarez is doing exactly what we thought he would do. Yelich isn't necessarily doing that. I think he's doing better than most people thought he would. And that's not saying a lot. That's a 251 average, a 726 OPS, but he does have 13 stolen bases, 8 home runs, 59 runs. And the RBIs are weird though. 31 RBIs. quite low. But again,
Well, I
he's
think that has a
also
little bit to do with the Milwaukee offense not being very dominant,
wonky.
right? Like they're built on pitching, and it's been obvious that we haven't seen that path to greatness for their offense yet. Still could come out in the second half, but we just haven't seen it.
Yeah, very much. And I mean, Alvarez is a stud. He's an all-star. Yelich is a former MVP, top 10 guy, fallen from grace outside the 200 ADP, or not ADP, but rankings. And he's kind of come back into it. So that's another guy that I think is interesting. And somebody else is Vaughn in Chicago. Not Vince, everybody, but we talked about the struggles last year with Andrew Vaughn and manager, whether you wanted to say it was manager related, where he was playing, all that kind of stuff. Well, he's the 115th overall player in 8x8 right now. So you're happy with that. 301 average, 820 OPS at the All-Star break, 36 runs, which this is the opposite of Yelich. Low on the run side. RBIs are 48, 10 dingers, and he's putting the ball in play. Like no concerns on the strikeouts. Walks are low, but that's always not always. That's been something for him to need to work on, and he's been somewhat consistent. The last month, the average was over 280. Last 2 weeks, 300. Good to see that Andrew Vaughn, as a first baseman outfielder, is an MLB player now, regular.
And the funny part is the amount of people that have wrote off the White Sox is pretty crazy.
It's a long line, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long list. They're like basically floating around 500, and their offense is just getting healthy. Like they're a starting pitcher away from being the best team in the AL Central, and so I'm a little shocked to see as many people have written them off as they have. But I expect them to be dominant. I expect Vaughn to be a piece of that in the second half, assuming that offense can stay healthy. Right? I mean, that's a big asterisk right now, but if it does, I expect them to be good. A guy that hasn't been healthy the last little bit, and it's definitely impacted people's thoughts on him, is Taylor Ward. He's definitely gotten a little cold down the last stretch here. A guy that absolutely tore the cover off the baseball in the first stretch. Made Joe Madden look really good before he got fired, and honestly, like pretty much since that point, Taylor Ward has not been very good. He's 242 over the last month, 664 OPS. Whereas he's got 12 home runs on the season, and it's not been good of late. So definitely deserving of the first half All-Star nod,
but also
there's definitely
Cinderella.
Definitely it's midnight. He's a pumpkin right now, and that's for sure where we're at with Taylor Ward. Like I don't see him coming back. Like I don't see how this guy takes playing time from Joe Adell at this point.
Adele, Brandon Marsh, you got guys that I think the Angels would want to play. If the Angels are going to say this is not our year, which I mean makes sense, you need to try your best to. I don't know the contractual situation for Ward. I assume he's a 1 year for 1 year and done. I don't think he would have control left or anything like that. So to me, it would be trade him off to some team that wants some outfield depth, and then just count on your own guys a little bit more down the stretch. And the same can be said of Syndergaard with the Angels.
I saw a funny tweet earlier, and it said, "I want Soto to go to the Angels so that I can see a 20 WAR from Ohtani, Trout, and Soto, and then still finish somehow 79 and 83."
Yeah,
I was like, "That's pretty good."
Yeah, it's shameful.
It really is. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. I actually got a note in here, part of the reason for that. Starting pitching side, I mean, there's some obvious culprits here. Verlander, I mean, awesome. Are we really surprised?
Congratulations, Verlander. Like, that's great.
The guy's just a horse, and, good on him. I mean, this is how you become a Hall of Famer, right? You tell people or make them think your career's over, and then you change everything. And guess what? He's been awesome. He would look a lot better in Blue Jays blue. I'm not gonna lie, but good on him. He's hard not to like, right? As a pitcher, if you're a fan of baseball and you don't like Verlander, then you maybe aren't a fan of baseball.
Yeah, definitely.
That's just how it is. Kyle Wright is a guy that definitely took a step forward. We saw pieces of this in the playoffs last year, but definitely a guy that has taken that step forward finally. And it's been a little touch and go here and there with Kyle Wright, but for the most part, we saw what we kind of want to see out of a guy that had all the potential in the world. A little bit older prospect, college arm out of Vandy, 6'4" guy, 215. So like the frame is there. The FIP is finally coming down. The ERA is 2.95. I mean, what not to love at this point, Robbie? Are you in here for the long haul at this point? or do you have any concerns about Kyle Wright being this guy forever?
Well, much like people weren't sure about Max Fried, I think Atlanta's just settling in with a really nice rotation, and Kyle Wright's part of that. So I'm in on him. Yeah, the next guy up, Tony Gonsolin with the Dodgers. He's absolutely Julio Urias. He is Julio Urias this year, 11-0, but the K to 9 is under a strikeout per inning. However, he comes back with a 2.02 ERA. Check that one. A decimal 8.43 whip. Thank you very much. And for those quality start fans out there, 9 quality starts. So Tony Gonsolin is money in the bank. And for Dynasty guys too, he was very inexpensive at the end of the 2020 season heading into 2021. And I'm sure was still like very, wishy-washy. Like he's now a solidified guy in a dominant division winning rotation, but not long ago, I would argue maybe this offseason, he could have been had for marginal prospect, top 70 to 100 type prospect return, maybe 2 of those type of guys. And you could have look at what you'd have if you had made that deal. Sandy Alcantara, I just want to say with Miami, I'm so happy because everybody just said not going to be able to do it. Fastball only, blah, blah, blah. He's turned into a pitcher. He's doing all the things that I wanted him to do all the way back in 18. So I'm happy to just see him there. Shane McClanahan with the Rays. Ty, he's one of the top pitchers, if not the top pitcher, depending on your format. And he's been so dominant. It's been so fun to see. And we weren't sure where the innings were going to go with Tampa. And I mean, kind of thankfully, they've stuck to somewhat traditional, rotation this year. And McClanahan started every 5th day and dominated the competition. It has not been perfect, but it has been damn good. And the strikeouts for days.
Yeah, no, I would agree. This is a guy that we both loved. Guy next on the list, I'm going to throw a big red flag on Nestor Cortez in the second half. Been awesome. One of the best stories of the first half, like no argument. Even though he's a Yankee, I could still appreciate the guy getting it done with the little weird delivery and a mustache. Like, I mean, I'm here for that. But
he's comic relief on the mound, man. Like he's getting outs. He's getting outs, but he is comic relief. You watch him pitch and you're like, somebody's just gonna like crank one on him. And then he's me
in our men's league, right? And I get out there, like the mound, like the landing areas on the mounds in the Muni fields that we play in are just a guess. So you got to change your arm angle to hit the plate. And so I feel exactly like Nestor Cortez when I'm out there. But, it's a guy that just gets outs. Like, and there's something to be said about that. Like, we're in an era of pitching where it's just like throw hard, make it impossible for them to react. And Cortez is out there doing things to confuse people and get outs.
The last month, he has pumpkined a bit, as we mentioned with previous players, 4.50 ERA, but still 24 strikeouts in 26 innings with a 1-1 record. 2 quality starts in the last 30 days, 7 for the year. So you're talking about a first half dominant player who's had his first bump of the year the last 30 days. This all-star break could be the perfect medicine for him.
Well, and he's going to have a lot of games against the lefty mashing AL East, right? So, I mean, that's the big thing for me. That is going to be a tough one down the stretch for him. That's just going to be tough going. A guy that you were in on, Robbie, and kudos, you've shouted his praise in a lot of spots. Tyler Wells in Baltimore. Kudos to us too. Like we spent the entire offseason being like, guys, Baltimore's not going to be that bad. Right? Yeah. We talked about it ad nauseum, and I'm sure regular listeners like, yeah, we get it. They're going to be good, but you guys are idiots. And then
they have no pitchers. They have no pitchers, and that's the problem with Baltimore is they're not going to do anything. And I mean, I fully admit, I thought Tyler Wells was going to be like a really good closer. Mm-hmm. That's where I thought Tyler Wells was going to be. He finished last year. He got hurt before the final week, but he was getting into close situations. And credit goes to Baltimore pitching coach and whomever is sorting out where their pitchers are going into games, whether that be dating back to spring training. But the move to take former starter Jorge Lopez, who was a relief pitcher starter last year, and to swap him and Tyler Wells, which is basically what happened in Baltimore in April, has worked out great for Baltimore because Wells has gotten stronger. Former Rule 5 pick, by the way. Always got to mention those guys. And we missed that draft last year. So, I am more excited for the 2023 Rule 5 draft than I am Christmas because there will be talent talent moving with these teams who have had to wait 2 years now. But Tyler Wells went from the bullpen to the rotation and built up very much like Jays fans saw Estrada? No, Marco, what's his? Estrada. Yeah, Marco Estrada.
Yeah.
Do years ago. Sorry, I don't know. I was watching Chips. Maybe I'm getting my Estradas mixed up. Anyway, 5 quality starts to the midway point here of the season. 59 Ks and 81 and a third innings pitched. Not ideal. However, this is a guy who's over a strikeout per 9. I think Baltimore is trying to pitch him to stay in the game longer, not to punch guys out, which means for the dynasty owners out there, next year, Tyler Wells is going to be a better pitcher than he is today. And the rest of this year, Tyler Wells is going to be, for the remainder of the season, going to be encroaching in new territory, which is additional innings pitched. So we could see Baltimore do a few things with him. I'm interested to see what they are.
One flag there, Robbie, just on Tyler Wells, is that if you're in a redraft format or you're drafting him on the wire, or you're doing like he's a free agent, you're picking him up, you're probably going to have to overpay for him into next year, right? So that's the one thing. If you're in on Tyler Wells or you can acquire him for a reasonable price now, that's the right time to do it. He's going to have a little more hype going into next season. A guy that, Robbie,
hold on a moment. Before we do our second straight pat on the back, Tyler Wells trade, you mentioned it. I just made one in our Real Money Auction League, 30-team league. Aaron Savale, who has the rest of this year and one more year next year. I traded the rest of Robbie Grossman for this year. I traded, I don't know, two more dudes who are done at the end of this year. It was 4 guys I traded away to get back Tyler Wells for the rest of this year and 3 more years. I was happy to make that deal because I think the upside of Tyler Wells far exceeds what you can get from an Aaron Savale for the next year and change. And for whatever reason, my team has not been able to, I have not been able to roster the right guys at the right time. So I made the trade to acquire Tyler Wells, and people in that league are like, why would he trade? Oh, it was like Tyler Naquin. It was Tyler Naquin the rest of this year. Why would you trade guys? 2 of the 4 players you traded are better than the guy you got back. This is a contracts league. That's where it gets complex. That's why you can always hit us up at Dingers Pod on Twitter to ask these detailed questions, at Tourney Boss for Ty, at Robbie Baseball 1 for me. We're here to help on those. I was so happy to acquire Tyler Wells because I don't give a rat's boot about the rest of this year with Tyler Wells. I am looking at 2023 and beyond, where I'm hoping there's going to be Tyler Wells' name penned into that rotation. That's what it is for him. Now, go ahead. Let's do another one. Because this part's fun.
I'm going to go to the bullpen. I'm going to go to the back just so we don't do the double bat pack. Pat on the back. You got it.
Yeah.
Dan O'Bard, future Toronto Blue Jay, is the first guy I'm going to throw out here. Gotta love this, right? A guy that had what looked to be the beginning of a dominant back end of the bullpen career, and then just disappeared, fell away, came back with like some marginal stuff, but was getting outs. And then this year just looks like he's the power arm again. And, that's promising if somebody can go acquire him. Like this is a perfect trade target for a team like the Jays who need another right-hand arm in their bullpen. There's several other teams that need these guys. Like I'm looking at you, San Diego, right? I doubt Colorado's going to send him to San Diego, but those are the things that could be interesting about Bard. But if you can get outs in Colorado, you can get outs anywhere. I mean, that's just the reality. So kudos to him. He's been awesome. And anybody that got in on him for cheap, even last year, like if you're hanging on to him from a previous pickup, good for you. Great pickup. A guy that I love because he's dominant in my MLB The Show team. That's Taylor Rogers. And
he's dominant in MLB too, Ty. Not just on your video game. He's been amazing since that.
He's not as important in real life as he is in that video game. But
that just means you don't roster him anywhere. But your video game.
That is correct. So I mean, he's been awesome. Unique delivery, lots of good things going on there. That was a great trade in my opinion for San Diego. I don't think they gave up on something they were going to be able to save in Chris Paddock. They got rid of him before Tommy John, which was also a savvy play. They may or may not have known that based on medical records, but At the end of the day, great move. And then Robbie, I'm going to tee it over to you for Clay Holmes, who we talked about last season being a phenomenal pickup for the Yankees down the stretch. And one of those ones that, like, at first glance, I hadn't seen a ton of him in Pittsburgh. I'll be honest. Like, he snuck up on me. But when he got to New York, it was like, wait a second, where did this guy come from? And why did nobody think this guy was awesome? Because he's fantastic. And Robbie, I'll let you go from there.
Well, Clay Holmes is almost like a guy you would see on Pitching Ninja tweets. You know, you're like, oh, look at how much this moves. And then you'd like look and you're like, oh, well, like he's got a 6 ERA and, you know, none of this makes sense to me, right? Like he's not good. But then you move him from the NL to the AL where he gets a new ERA and all those fun things just disappear. And all of a sudden the Yankees coach are like, well, here's what you're going to do, son. Here's how you become effective for us. And then he headed into this year with, I thought, the opportunity to be a save hold guy with, you know, like he did last year, getting some wins because he's in games late and getting saves periodically, but more so holds. And then you know, Chapman goes down and all of a sudden Clay Holmes is the guy. And now he certainly has tuckered out the past couple of weeks, to be expected, because he already, he went 30 innings without allowing a run. He was 30 innings of perfection to start the year. Of course, there's going to be a recoil, and the All-Star break comes along at a great time for him because now he gets to, I think he's at the All-Star game. He better be. He gets to enjoy, you know, 4 or 5 days of fun and excitement. So if you listen to him, he's rostered in 89% of Yahoo leagues. Now, I know we don't have a listenership that's roughly 89% of all the leagues in Yahoo. We don't have all those guys listening, but early on in the year when he was 1, 2, and up to 5% owned, I'm hoping that was some of the Dingers listenership out there, seeing what I had seen in the offseason and the possibility for this year. So, and then the last two guys are really easy and it's really short. The Williams Hader combo in Milwaukee. Yeah. If you're a save hold guy, I mean, you pay the piper to get those guys for the rest of this year in your dynasty leagues, you pay for them for the long term. Like, man, that is a good combo. If it's saves only, obviously it gets a little trickier. You want to bend to Hader, but you don't know what's going to happen because of money and contracts and MLB baseball. But if it saves holds, I mean, they're a safe bet to be an amazing combo, even if they're not teammates, you know, in 3 years or whatever. They'll just be useful. So, and those are all the positive guys. That's a big list.
So let's get into the non-stars because there's some interesting ones here. You know, the catchers, we'll get them out of the way because one of them's expected a little, and one of them is kind of a little bit of a surprise on the downturn. Jacob Stallings, like, I don't think anybody's shocked that he's not been great, but at the same time, you know, disappointing based on the older, you know, ADP. You know, just not quite getting it done. Are you surprised with this, Robbie? I know you had talked about, you know, a guy that could get some cheap at bats. Is it really shocked you?
I just thought there was starting playing time for Stallings, and based on the fact that Miami acquired him, I thought Miami was going to play him and he would have some success, even if it was average and he was batting, you know, 7, 8, or 9 in the lineup. I thought the ability for him to produce was there, and it has not come to fruition in Miami.
Well, I mean, he does have 207 at bats, which isn't nothing for a catcher, right? Like, it's not nothing, but it's also, you know, a few at bats behind the starter, right? But
it's been,
you know,
the production, right?
Yeah, like OPS is 476. Like, that's not going to cut it.
He was a slightly above league average guy last year, but for catchers, that made him even better because his 704 OPS last year, 246 average, and 8 dingers was not great, but it was production that was fine, and, you know, 53 RBIs, 38 runs. But this year, like you said, Ty, in about half as many at bats as he had last year, all the numbers are less. All the production across the board is less. The average is down 60 points. And then, like you said, the OPS is down almost 225. So it's not good. And that's why he's on the list, because I think people, especially some of those NFBC leagues, he was a flyer catcher, the last guy you were going to pick up. So as dumb as 2 catcher leagues are, those are also 30-team leagues, right? So he's owned, and somebody had an expectation for him to be decent. Yasmani Grandal is the disappointment for the catcher. You could argue Gary Sanchez, but he's had a few weeks. As somebody who rosters him only in our home league, he's had a few weeks where he's been of use. Yasmani Grandal has been a frustration from you know, April on, and I think he's actually on the wire in our home league, Ty, which is a 14-team league. So Grandal, 97 overall ADP. I think he was the number 4 catcher off the board and a top 5 dynasty guy, falling hard right now.
Well, and it's a guy that has never been below the league average as a catcher ever in his entire career. and he's significantly below it right now. And, I think this is one that, Chicago has to ask some hard questions about the catcher position. Now, it's a guy that does have, pretty decent defensive, what's the right word, accolades to kind of keep him in the game. He has less at bats than Jacob Stalling. Part of that's injuries. Jeez, can't talk right now. But the reality here is that down the stretch, if Chicago's a playoff team, they're going to have to ask some very hard questions about their catching position. So it's enough for catchers. We'll move on. First base, Yuli Gurriel is a guy that has just hit everything since he's come into the league. He hasn't always had red hot full seasons, but he certainly has had really hot stretches that have carried his numbers in every single season. This is a career 288 batting average. He's hitting 239 right now, or 238, sorry. But at the end of the day, like, he'll still get to 260 by the end of the year, Robbie. So, like, I think this is a guy that, if I was to say, is there a first base guy that I can go get for really, really cheap that's going to get me hits? He's going to get me some RBIs. He might throw in a little bit of power here or there. Like, it's Yuli Gurriel. He's going to cost you absolutely nothing.
Okay.
If you're a contending team and you need to fill the spot, like, this is a guy that I would bet on. Like, give me veterans in the second half all day, every day.
Well, that's interesting. So that you're basically saying he's going to be a 280 plus hitter second half, which is great. He does need to be to get it up, because if you're going on like a per at bat kind of production, this has been his worst year as a pro. And especially after last year, people were saying, well, he's just going to be able to kind of continue that. The dynasty expectation was, we are in the twilight, but this is a key year. So if you're a Gurriel owner out there, if you've got him on the roster, Ty's telling you not to move him. And I agree. I'm not going to move him because he's not worth much. And I would rather have him on my bench and hope for a turnaround. But I would certainly be looking for my starter to not be Gurriel at this moment in time. So,
well, and
if I'm a Gurriel Votto owner, I'm probably also not doing too well.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, but the reality is, though, like, their strength of schedule down the stretch is really interesting, right? Like, they've got some tough components. They play a lot of games against, Seattle, obviously, in the division, and then they've got stretches against Philly, Minnesota, the Rays, Atlanta, and New York. But, like, in that group, really only, the A's, the Rays maybe, and the Yankees sometimes have strong pitching, right? So if I'm looking for a guy that's lining up against some bad pitching,
Right.
Gurriel's interesting in the second half, because his weaker opponents, so he's got a ton of games against the Angels, the Rangers, and the A's down the stretch. So, like, when you look at that and you say this is the opportunity he has to hit, I like those odds. I would play that card all day.
All right, Ty. Who's the next guy up here? Is somebody that you wanted to talk about. He was, fantasy darling coming into this year. He won one in all the rookie drafts 2 years ago. Discuss.
Yeah, Spencer Torkelson's not a bad baseball player. And I said this offseason, Robbie, that he should have spent most of, if not all of this year in AAA, right? He's just not ready. It's not his fault. He got put up too early. And I don't really understand why the Tigers did it. They had enough infield depth. They could have thrown Isaac Paredes out there, who has been fine for Tampa Bay. Like, they had depth. I do not understand why they did this to Torkelson. He's going to be fine in the long haul. He's going to have an Andrew Vaughn type trajectory with more power, right? So, that's the reality. It's just going to be a little slower burn, whereas he could have come in next season with one less year of contract burnt and lit the world on fire. So it's an interesting ploy by the Tigers. I'm not really sure what their strategy was behind this. Maybe they just wanted him to be around Miggy more. Maybe it was that simple.
It's possible. Jonathan Shoup played a lot of first base last year. Maybe Detroit didn't like it. And maybe they didn't want to give it to Miggy at all either. So perhaps they felt like that was their, quote, only move. But as we all know, major league teams can move players around at will. These are amazing athletes. You're willing to take a hit at first base with the odd drop ball or missed throw that somebody else, a superior defender would get if you get that offense back. And Torkelson was only just sent down before the All-Star break. It's expected he'll be right back up, but I don't see why you wouldn't maybe let him go down there and start raking and then bring him back up. Like, he has probably never struggled as much in his life as he has this season. So it might be nice to see it. Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
a
find
slump
a good
buster in
slump buster.
AAA.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Hopefully they've got a road trip to Durham, and he can go
Yeah,
find
that's
himself
right.
a
Exactly. Yeah.
slump
So,
buster.
I mean, the reality is like he's gonna be fine, but like dynasty owners, no reason to be concerned. But if you're expecting him to help you win a playoff game this year or stretch this year, I wouldn't. The aforementioned teammate Jonathan Scope, a guy that's been not like great, but really not that bad either. Robbie, like definitely
Well,
a
that's
guy
thanks
that
to the last 2 weeks, Ty. He had 4 stolen bases the last 2 weeks, but he only has 5 on the year. So
yep.
I'm confused by what in the hell he's been up to. If he's turning it around, I'm a happy guy, but it sucked. And I counted on him in a couple of my NFBC leagues, including the Surf League, or Surfer, or well, whatever, one of the 2 leagues. And I just won't drop him because I'm like, he's better than this, you
Yeah,
know?
I agree. He's the kind of guy though that Detroit will probably trade. I think, or do they have him on a long? I forget what he signed. Did he sign a 1-year deal? Yeah, he
I
did.
think he and Grossman are both expiring contracts.
Yeah, so they're obvious trade candidates. You need a lefty heavy lineup. I'm not sure where the right fit is for him off the top of my head, but the White Sox maybe actually could be an interesting one to fill out some depth in the infield there, with the ability to play a little bit of outfield, which he has done. I think played some left field the last couple of weeks too, Robbie. I'm not positive on that one. I might double check
I'll have
that
a
while I
quick look.
say it.
That's all
But
right.
at the end
If
of the
you talk about the next guy, I'll have a look at Shope.
Yeah, I mean, so Scope's a guy that I agree with you though. I think there's a bounce back. India's a guy that I told everybody. If you were a regular listen, you will remember this. I warned you about Jonathan India this season, right? I told you he was going to have a recoil. This one was obvious to me, just because he has the profile, small guy, with a little bit of overplay last year. Like he was due for a fallback. Now, is he going to be a bad player long term? No, that doesn't mean that. But these are the things that you have to look for when your team is in a window to win in Dynasty. Like you can't have a Jonathan India be the reason you're not good.
Right. Back to Shope very quickly. He has never appeared in the outfield in MLB. Tie.
All right.
Crazy.
I thought I
as that
saw him
sounds.
play in the outfield the other day. Maybe that's why I second guessed it. Maybe I got him crossed up with somebody else. But
Well, just
either
on
way,
the Torkelson front, though, Ty, he's been a career. Shope has been a career second baseman dating back to 2013. Last year, 2021, was his first year with a professional appearance at first base. He played 114 games for the Tigers at first base, their primary first baseman. Only one over at third base and 38 at second. He this year has only played second base and then DH'd once. So it's been an odd year for Shope. Maybe that's part of the reason why we're seeing a struggle. He's gone back to a position that although he's been a career second baseman, he got off of it, and maybe there's an adjustment for him getting back, and hopefully there's a return here for him.
Yep, I agree. Teammate Mike Moustakas is the first guy on our board at third base. This is a guy that has had a pretty reasonable career up till now. Career 248 batting average. He's 210 on the season. The power numbers are a little bit below his standards, especially considering he plays a great American ballpark. A little disappointing. I think this is a matter of I signed a big deal to play here with a good team, and that team left me. And I'm just kind of stuck here with a bunch of pitchers that can't get outs, and a couple guys that are trying to revitalize your career. And what motivation do I have? Like, this is a guy that I would love to acquire in deeper leagues, Robbie, in the offseason this year, because I think he's going to have a bit of an uptick next season, looking for that last career contract.
So there's career left with Moustakas. It's an absolute buy low this year.
That's it.
That's fair.
So and I think there's going to be some people that maybe try to take advantage of the Reds on this one as well. Like I've talked about it with Votto and the Jays and Luis Castillo. Like I think there's a play for a bunch of teams, not just Toronto, but like anybody that wants to acquire Castillo. Like you've got 2 left-handed bats on that team with big contracts. So like if you're a suitor for Castillo, I got to imagine that Cincinnati front office is saying, listen, like we can do a deal, but you got to take some of this money off of our books. And Moustakas falls into that category for sure. So I think, there's an interesting potential in the second half here for him to maybe revitalize that bat. So like I'm still going to wait to the offseason for me because I don't like the risk. But if you wanted to get in ahead of that, like there's no lower time to buy Mike Moustakas than right now.
All right. The next guy up here is Jeimer Candelario, who I think It's safe to say the expectations were he was going to be top 15 third baseman, which is, that's, I don't think anybody thought he would have been any worse than that after last year's just under 800 OPS, 271 average, 16 dingers, and decent runs and RBIs, 60s and 70s for both. But this year it has just fallen. 191 average, 570 OPS. Dingers are down. I mean, across the board, it's just been weak. And we didn't want to see him hold that line from last year. We wanted to see a little bit of a bump up. And there are several Detroit players on here because the expectations for Detroit were higher for fantasy owners, for fantasy players, for fantasy analysts. I mean, we thought, like, I didn't have him for Torkelson because I didn't expect to see him. But Schopp, yes. Candelario, we're mentioning. There's an outfielder. Well, there's two outfielders in Detroit that we're about to discuss too. There are issues in Detroit.
Well, one thing here with Candelario, and we flagged it in previous years, Robbie, is that Candelario is a career 270 hitter from August on, and his OPS in that same time is north of 800. So there's a guy here that, like, if you're looking for sneaky acquisitions come playoff time, Candelario is an interesting guy. There's no reason that he's going to have, a huge amount of success, but of his career, what has he got? 52 home runs. 15 of those home runs are in September. So just something to note, that he does get hot down the stretch. It's been his thing. We talked about it last year. We talked about it in the offseason when drafting and talking about it now. So just don't get lost on that. A guy that can play the corner infield positions can be valuable
and
as an acquisition.
Maybe there's a deal to be had that gets him out of Detroit and off to a warmer climate so that he could have, presumably, I mean, we can always make an excuse for a player, right? The AL Central does not have warm locations in April and into May. So maybe there's a way to get him to, one of the coasts where he might have some warmer games earlier in the year that could benefit him. But we've got a guy who last year was very much a darling, very excited and happy to see good things happen to him. And then Brandon Crawford, who this year, just prior to his injury, regardless, it was not coming together like it did last year. The power was way down. We were not seeing stolen bases. The average was down about 80 points from last year, and the OPS down 270 points. So Brandon Crawford has absolutely been a dump at shortstop. San Francisco might very well be ready to move on or bring him back for that veteran bit or bob. But I mean, it hasn't been good. That's the easy way to say it. And it can transition just as easily over to Kansas City. And when your team is not doing what they're supposed to, and you have guys on your team who pretty much overachieved last year, in Nicky Lopez specifically, and you got a guy like Mondesi who's not there, and you had a new guy in Bobby Witt who kind of needed both of those others to be good. It's hurt the whole infield, and Nicky Lopez has struggled mightily. Last year, 300 average. This year, it's been 240. Mind you, the last month, he's been hitting 300. However, OPS last year was 743. This year, it's 580. And he's not a power guy. That's never been his thing. We talked about this last year. Stolen bases. That's where you can get value with Nicky Lopez. You have to take your stolen bases, add your home runs to that, and tell yourself with Nicky Lopez, he's helping you on the stolen bases, whereas some other guy, a Schwarber, is going to help you on the home runs. And then you combine the Nicky Lopez and the Kyle Schwarber. That's the classic move, right? You put two guys in there, and that's how you get it right. But Nicky Lopez has been absolutely disappointing for fantasy owners who had any hype into him. And this was not a guy that we liked. But we know that there are others out there that really, really did like him. So now we can move to the outfields where, I mean, we kind of teed off. We could have made this list 25 long. Ty, just for reference, included the entire Washington center field players. So if you played center field in Washington, you're a disappointment. Basically, if you're not Soto, if you are not Juan Soto, you're a disappointment. And I think that's the easiest way to say it. We had a breakout candidate in Jesus Sanchez with Miami, Ty. Both you and I were thinking good things in our home league draft. I drafted him pretty much just to upset you, but I also had hopes that he was going to do good things.
And I thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, unfortunately, he hasn't. I think he's on the wire now. I picked up Michael Harris, who's just like on a permanent bench spot for me right now because I've got Mountcastle, Soto, and Acuna, who I play those guys. So,
and somehow you're third from last with that outfield.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, for what I said to you before we started recording, I've got 8 of the top 60 players in various positions, and yet I have 1 win in the last 8 weeks in that league. It is ridiculous. So another major disappointment, and we'll get the Detroit guys off, Ty, and I'll hand it off to you. Akil Baddoo, brutal April, sent down. I mean, everybody Detroit sucked in April, but Baddoo was terrible, sent down, was not playing well, and then did the thing we all hoped. He raked at AAA. He's better than the AAA level that he kind of skipped over as a Rule 5 guy. So Baddoo is back up with the club. I don't know what playing time is going to be like, but if you are looking for a player who should be good in the second half that everybody's kind of forgot about, Dynasty as well, Akil Baddoo might be somebody. I traded him in April, May. I made a move where I was trying to acquire future, similar things, right? I forget who it was. I think I picked up Taylor Trammell. Because I needed healthy body, so I had to give up Akil Baddoo to get that done. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Robbie Grossman's the other guy. I expected Grossman to be just as patient at the plate as he was last year. He has not, and I mean, the league I thought I was going to make the most hay in, I have Robbie Grossman, and I paid a lot for him, and I mentioned it earlier in the podcast. I just traded him away. I'm very disappointed in Robbie Grossman's year. I don't know what we're going to see out of the second half. I don't know if Detroit's going to be inclined to play him a lot because they've got Victor Reyes, Akil Baddoo, oh my goodness, you name it, right? Riley Green could be up and hitting. There's options that Detroit has that I don't think Robbie Grossman's a fit for. His disappointing first half really sucks, and it's hurt me personally in fantasy. So I'm glad he's on this list.
Yeah, no, and I would agree. I'm disappointed by Grossman. I'm excited about Baddoo. I'm glad they sent him down. That's what needed to happen. He missed some polish elements, and it was obvious last year. It was the right thing to do. That's
he was a platoon guy when he was raking, right? Like that was his thing. He could not be a baseball player. He could be a platoon player.
Yeah, and it's why I couldn't figure out why they decided not to send Torkelson down. It made no sense to me. I just couldn't wrap my head around that idea. That said, the rest of the outfield here is full of some interesting guys. Chris Bryant, who has 4 home runs this year in Colorado. Shocking.
Injuries, though, Ty. He shouldn't be on this. He's been
in there. Yeah, but like you're in Colorado, you got 4 home runs. 3 of those home runs were in a 2-day stretch. Like, injuries cool, but he also has been a disappointment when he has been playing from a production standpoint, right?
Okay.
Like I don't care.
All right,
I don't care if he doesn't have. I'm not expecting him to have 30, but like 10, like should be a foregone conclusion for Chris Bryant in Colorado, right? In the games that he has played. He's a disappointment so far. Also a potential buy low again because of the location of his games. Brian Reynolds, slowly getting better as your note added after I added him. But for me, like you're a contact guy. Like if you're a contact guy and that's your calling card, like I don't want to see dips. That terrifies me that Brian Reynolds is showing this dip at this point. So either he is trying really hard to play his way off of this roster, which is very possible because he's a Pirate. But at the same time, like I'm concerned about his long-term fantasy value because if he's showing that dip now with really nothing stopping him from playing baseball on every single day against a relatively weak NL Central overall, I'm not really happy about Brian Reynolds today or moving forward. So that's my big concern there. Then there's Tyler O'Neill, who is in the classic I work out every day injury part of his career. And, the power's there, strikeout numbers are there. The batting average may be there, but like 260 for Tyler O'Neill is MVP if he's playing every day, right? Like that's just what it is. So we haven't seen enough of a stretch from Tyler O'Neill, but the amount of hype he garnered coming into the season after the season he had last year obviously led him to make this list. I think he's, in my opinion, the number 1 guy on this list because he's been such a disappointment. Yes, it's been injury, but that's part of baseball is you got to stay healthy. And he has not done that. So him and Chris Bryant fit that one. And I added the note when you were making fun of me, the champions do not make excuses. And that's the reality of those guys right there.
Wow. All I was saying was that Brian Reynolds is still a top 150 player. Now, the reasonable expectation was that he was a top 100 guy, and his ADP and everything was right around that mark. And he hasn't been bad, but it's just, to your point, if 2 years ago he sucked, last year he got it right, and everyone's like, okay, that's who he is. Well, then he dipped again, and he had a very slow start, but he has been better as of late. Unfortunately, he's now on the IL. I don't know what the span's going to be, but those are the roller coasters that screw over, especially head-to-head guys who need consistent players. If you're again, referencing Schwarber, if you're the type of guy who has a low average masher who can struggle, Brian Reynolds is one of your saviors, right? Luis Ariz is one of your saviors. The high average guys are the ones who can save you. And if you're also, Nick Madrigal, if he had played more, would have definitely made this list as a disappointment, because to this point he has been, but he has not played enough that, a week span where he gets 35 at bats, if he bats 300 or 320 in that, all of a sudden his average and his whole season line is going to look a lot better. But to this moment, he has not helped you for fantasy. But you can't say because someone's hurt that they are not good at fantasy. They're hurt. That's an X factor. If you want to talk about X stats, the injury, X injury, games played, that's got to be one that somebody can reasonably come up with instead of, in the wind on Wednesdays at parks that end in Y. Those are the kind of things that can actually help a fantasy player.
Well, and I completely agree with you, but here's the thing, though. The only element of fantasy baseball that you can't control is the injury. But if you can control the guys that stay healthy more often, then that is something that you have to play for. And the reality is those guys, Chris Bryant less so than Tyler O'Neill, have showed it, or O'Neill has showed a trend towards this direction. Now, there's lots of guys that have early starts in their career where they spend the first couple of years injured and then become superstars with no health issues. So it's always plausible, but you also have to be prepared for that understanding when you're doing your draft. Like if you draft a fragile outfield, well, guess what? You're probably going to have a bad year. And you just have to understand that as part of it. So on the pitching side, there's lots of interesting guys here. I topped it off with, you say Kikuchi because he's been brutal. And, flagged it immediately, Robbie, when we made the signing as Jays fans. Like,
absolutely,
this was a terrible signing.
Like it. I don't care. I don't know who was half in the bag when they signed it, outside of Pete Walker, because Kikuchi would not. Thank you. Kikuchi would not have been let go by Seattle if they felt he was a reliable major league starter. But they knew. I'm not praising Dipoto for letting a guy go that he signed. I'm saying that when they made that move, Toronto needed to have a game plan for him. And it's clear that they were like, throw your fastball. And then and whatever else, like he's not comfortable on the mound, and he's been getting hit, and it sucks. And he's the type of guy who you needed to be an SP5 that was like an SP2-3 for you. You needed bonus from Kikuchi because you still have him for 2 more years. But every year, Toronto has had that SP5 type guy who has come in and blown up and sucked. And it's dated back to when this regime took over in 2016. And every year they had a $10 million guy, $12 million guy who was not of use to them. Kikuchi looks to be the guy this year. You can tack on Ryu, but Ryu, again, injury. But we all knew that's that Fantasy X stat. We all knew that with Ryu, you were not getting 4 years that Toronto paid for. You had 12 good starts in 2020. It has been a slog since then. So although there could be veteran value to having a Ryu around, when he's not speaking English to his teammates, I don't know how much that's helping. You could watch and see how hard he works and other things like that, but you're not getting that conversation about grips, I think, as much. You know what I mean? Like that veteran leadership that they talk about paying for with other guys. Kikuchi can't provide that. Ryu couldn't provide that, except to each other, perhaps.
Yeah, Ryu was only ever a gateway to the other free agents. That's all he ever was.
Right. He was the showing the door that will pay.
Correct. That was exactly it. Kikuchi is a bad decision, one that, they would love to get rid of. And, similar to the Cincinnati conversation we had earlier.
Watch him go to the Reds.
Well, but here's the thing.
Hey, I'm not against it.
But the Reds are going to have an impossible time signing pitching. So if you can flip some money,
that's true.
There's a real deal to be had there. That said, John Gray signed a great deal for him. We talked about it this offseason being a good deal for Texas. Hasn't quite been yet, but as you noted, Robbie, it's getting better. 2.64 ERA the last month. Texas has been a sneaky good team, and that's with an underperforming Seager and Simeon, who are both slowly starting to round into form. Like that Texas team could cause some trouble for that AL West, who really has been a 2-horse race up until now. And so there really is some interesting competition down the stretch. And I wouldn't count Texas out because, they could still possibly see a Sam Huff in down the stretch. We could, in an absolute like outside shot, which I'm going to say is unrealistic, see Josh Jung, right? Like there's weird things that could happen in the end of the season, but I doubt we're going to see a Jung, but this Texas team could cause some headaches for some people.
Do you want me to give you a crazy could see him? Could
Let's see
see newly drafted Kumar Rocker. Could see
Yes,
that
also.
happen.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a good one.
The guy's been playing indie ball, and that's a thing. But John Gray, just really quickly, the last month, the ERA has been 2.64 on the year. He's got 100 Ks and 89 and 2/3 innings. The issue would be, and this goes back to the injury, only 6 quality starts. You were expecting, you being me, the fantasy dynasty guy who has had him as Colorado's should be better pitcher, who wants more quality starts, more of a quality pitcher, really. You're getting that right now. You just didn't get it in April and into May. In one league, our home league, I dropped him because I needed to go get a healthy body at that point in time when too many injuries were stacking up, and he was gone by the time I was looking to reacquire him. And that happens. But you've got to be able to make those moves, but then keep an eye in your dynasty leagues. If you did have him, or if you were looking to acquire him before, the price has now gone up significantly. I don't know if there's a better move to make than picking up a guy who's just started to turn the corner, as opposed to an absolute dumpster fire who's been sent down. So, I don't know what the better move is. John Gray certainly is trending in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And another guy, just real quick note, Robbie, we haven't talked about in a while. Bubba Thompson could be an interesting guy in Texas second half of the
disruptor.
season.
Yep.
That'd so your guy, speaking of disruptor, Brady Singer. What do you got here? What's the update on Singer?
I'm going to blame KC for this. They screwed him over at the start of the year, bringing Greinke back, which has not proven to do anything other than maybe get a few jerseys signed. Well, actually, he doesn't sign jerseys, and he throws baseballs away if you ask him to sign them. But they put Singer in an RP role and then demoted him to get stretched out because they were like, oh, wait, we need starters, because, Bubik blew up and Lynch was not getting it done either early on. But in 71 and 2/3 innings, he's been okay. 4 ERA, very league average guy, a few quality starts here and there. But this is somebody who is, for some reason, not in the good graces with KC to be in that top 5. And as I mentioned on trade candidates, Brad Keller would be a guy to get out of town. Zach Greinke would be a guy to get out of town, although I don't think they'll do Greinke. You move out so that Singer knows he's there, because Singer should be good. And I have him as a top 15 dynasty pitcher because I think there's positive movement to be made on the K-9, which when he came back after his AAA demotion, he had, I think, 11 Ks and a quality start. That's in Brady Singer to do, 3 out of 5 times when he's on. And that also goes back to my issue with Casey catching and Sal Perez and things that are going on behind the scenes that we can't, put a stat behind, but you got to watch the games. You got to know what's going on with players. And I think Brady Singer's on the up and up here. There are a few guys here I can rapid fire tie to swing us through. Barrios with Toronto has been an absolute disappointment. We talked about it early on. I went through the schedule and told you how tough it was going to be for him. It's continued to be. When he's got good matchups, you've seen good results. When he's playing tough teams, it's not going well. Patrick Corbin has just been such a weird thing. There were so many people who thought Patrick Corbin's got, gas in the tank and he's going to be a good guy here and there. He's had moments, absolutely. But it was after a disastrous April that, in dynasty leagues, he would have been dropped. Salary leagues, he would have been dropped. People didn't want him on the roster taking up space. And now he's a streamer at best. And that's not great for your dynasty league. And second half, if Washington moves guys out like Bell, as Ty was alluding to, it's going to get even worse. So you've got Rogers with Miami. It's been a disappointment. Unfortunately, I'm calling Gausman a bit of a disappointment because the overall line isn't promising, but we've seen it. Like, we've seen good. We've also just seen some bad out of him. And it's not as steady as it's supposed to be. We also stated it wasn't going to be. I wasn't a huge Gausman guy headed into this year, trying really hard not to hate on the team I love. But I wasn't liking how it was being built, and that was a concern of mine. Kopech is somebody who we don't talk about anymore on the podcast. He's transitioning from a relief pitcher to a starter. We were all saying the Ks are going to be the thing, right? But 83 innings pitched this year, 74 Ks, a 3-6 record, not cutting it. However, the things we thought there could be a struggle with, the whip, 1.18, we'll take that, and a 3.36 ERA aren't bad. Let's see what he's got in the second half. Kopech might be a dynasty buy low right now, but you've got to be willing to ride a weird second half possible return to the bullpen. Who knows what they'll do for the innings with Kopech. And then Ty, I don't know if you want to touch on the next guy up. I'm happy to if you're not.
Yeah, I think Josiah Gray kind of fits into the same category as Kopech, though. Like, I think you've got a guy that's learning how to pitch at the pro level. Definitely not as overwhelmingly dominant as we'd like him to be, but both guys are going to be fine in the long haul. They're just big bodies learning how to pitch, right? I mean, that just is what it is. I like Josiah Gray better than Kopech, honestly. Like, if you were to tell me, like, Kopech's
you think
going back
that's
to
a
the
more
pen,
reliable guy?
Yeah, but I just don't think Kopech stuff's I don't know the right way to say it. Like, I don't think it's crisp enough and consistent enough. Like, I think there's some tells with his stuff. His stuff's like good.
Non-elite pitcher then.
Well, it's just like the second and I don't have it in front of me, Robbie, but I'm going to predict that the second and third time through the order he gets beat up a little bit. Right? Okay. And it's because they like
so
because
a Kopech dive is needed by us in the second half then.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'll have to look at it a little bit closer, but that's my concern. Whereas I think Josiah Gray is just a better pitcher, like and thrower versus pitcher is what I mean by that, right? Like, you know, Kopech is the classic thrower, great stuff, just throws it hard. But there's some pitching that has to happen. So he could figure it out still very easily. The thing that I do like, Robbie, is that he isn't a hitter's ballpark and he's kept the ERA intact, right? I think that's a real positive. But, you know, both are very different guys than the last guy on the list who, you know, Robbie, that I despise as a fantasy pitcher. And I'll hand it over to you for that reason.
Yeah, it's Alex Wood. Alex Wood is 6-7 for the year, 90 Ks in 90 innings pitched, 4.20 ERA, and 3 quality starts. The issue is that Alex Wood has been really bad, and then he puts 2 good starts together, or, you know, 1 quality start and 1 5 2/3 innings, you know, as he did 2 weeks ago. And you're like, oh, Alex Wood's good. But in the overall, you've got to stream Alex Wood to get the best out of him. And that's frustrating when he's supposed to be able to help you win. The numbers are all a little bit worse than last year, but they're not too far off, right? 6-7 sucks. Like 6-7, if you're on the Dodgers, could be 12-1, right? We know that a good team can help you out in that aspect, or a dominant team can help you out in that aspect. And that's part of the issue with Alex Wood. But quality starts only being at 3. He's not staying in the games long enough. So he's nibbling for Ks. He's walking guys that he's not supposed to. And because of that, his overall, you know, likelihood of helping you the rest of the season, I think, is pretty low. And then beyond that, like, I think if you're in a keep forever dynasty league and Alex Wood's on a team that you're trying to make a deal with, there's no problem in trying to also acquire him in that deal for some additional depth, because San Francisco is going to be in important games in September, and you can look to figure out a way to possibly put him in your lineup. But as far as a start every day guy, like I thought he would be, he's not doing that, and that's why he's on this list.
Yeah, no, and I understand completely. Going to the bullpen here, you know, I listed the Angels bullpen because they've been atrocious. They easily cost Joe Madden his job. I mean, the rotation hasn't been great, but the bullpen has been, you know, very, very bad. We can go for days about how bad it's been, but we'll just leave it there.
Just watch an Angels game after the All-Star break if you're at all curious. If there's a way you can find, even just listen. If you have the MLB app and only the radio, which I did for a few years, just listen to an Angels game and you'll hear frustration from the home side as soon as the starter's out. Like, oh, here comes such and such. Great. He's been loose with the slider and leaving the fastball up high. You know, you'll hear how excited they aren't at that bullpen coming into games.
100%. Yep. Guy that's been super disappointing, Jake McGee, a guy that had a phenomenal season last year in San Francisco. Definitely disappointing. I rode like a 4-game hot stretch in the home league, Robbie, and then he cost me a little bit, but I managed to squeak out some Sunday wins. in that league because of Jake McGee. They were a lot closer.
Camilo Doval could be on here too, right? Maybe even the San Francisco kind of bullpen as a whole, right? Like they have not done what we thought, which was slam the door shut. McGee just lost his job, right? DFA'd. I don't think he was picked up, which is crazy to think that a team like, I mean, even for us, we're watching Toronto take Sergio Romo for a 2-week spin. You're telling me you're not going to take a shot on Jake McGee, but whatever. Camilo Doval has been a similar situation where it just hasn't been clean. Doval's at the other end of his career, of course, than McGee.
Yeah, but Doval's a young guy figuring it out, right? It'll get there eventually. I mean, I watched a game the other night. San Francisco was playing Milwaukee, and it was hard to believe that San Francisco is 5 games above 500. Like it was, it was bad. The errors they were making don't even make sense for major league players to make those errors. Like,
oh, look at the lineup, though, Ty. Like you're gonna be like, who? No matter what, who's that guy? Like San Francisco's moving bodies around. And it worked last year, but no, it's like need reliable veterans. That's what they had last year, and they're missing out on some of that this year.
Yeah, but it's hard to argue it. Their differentials plus 51. Like they're not a bad team. Like they're getting it done in a way that maybe is unconventional. And it really, like, if you look at Zadie, who's the GM there, like, if you look at where he was when Moneyball was a thing, and now Oakland is crappy, and he's over here helping the Giants win with a very similar strategy. Like makes you, Billy Beane always got all the credit, but let's call a spade here. Like there might be something else going on. But at the end of the day, like this San Francisco team is still surprising. They have some talent coming in the system. They still could be very good for a very long time, but they know something about baseball that the other teams do not right now. That is just evident to your point, because they're not running out stars at any position.
Well, and even keeping Brandon Belt, like I don't think they probably didn't want to do that. That was something that they were like, yeah, okay, kind of legacy thing. Yep. And that hasn't worked out great, but it's not like they had an alternative that's waiting in the wings. Joey Bart learning the gig, like you lost an all-star or a Hall of Famer who retired. Like it's a team that's somewhat transitioning, but it seems like they always are.
But remember, like San Francisco didn't sign Belt; they offered him a qualifying offer, and
no one else
wanted to sign Belt. Like that's really what it was. At the end,
I thought Belt took the qualifying offer.
Well, eventually he did, but like, you got to know that your market's not good enough in order. Like, you're not going to take a 1-year deal when you had a great season and not like you're just not getting the offers, right? Like that's the issue here, is that he clearly didn't get the offers. Like you can't like San Francisco that much. Like if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, like it's just one of those things that's a gap. And so interesting stuff. But the rest of the list here, Mark Melancon is just, a guy that's got outs for a really long time, when a lot of people continue to believe he probably won't get outs. This is a year where he's not getting outs. And ultimately, this is a guy that's going to be had at the trade deadline for almost nothing. And he's going to have a strong finish somewhere, right? So
Brad Hand,
I don't know about Brad Hand. That's harsh. But
well, I just mean moved, and he should be good, I guess. Sorry, that was a bad one, because Brad Hand was playing well, got moved to Toronto, was horrendous, went to the Mets, was not good, and then came back this year with Philly, and now he's good again. Like I don't know what happened. I mean, the interesting thing when he's in Toronto is that he painted like just a little bit outside the corner consistently. He just kept missing that corner, and when you have the stuff that he has, you can't miss the nibbles. You got to get him. And he just wasn't. So the last guy on the list is Aroldis Chapman, a guy that, in my opinion, should lose his job as the closer. Like, I just think that's where he's at in his career. He's shown inconsistencies, right? And when you're having the success that the Yankees are having without blowing those games that Chapman has blown over the last couple of years, like, I would rather put Chapman in the 8th inning, let him be pissed off, and let him come in and throw absolute heaters. That's what makes Chapman great. Put him in a spot where he can succeed. And guess what? Like, if he runs out in the 7th because the middle of the lineup's there, and you save the other guy, Holmes for the 9th, like that's a pretty good luxury to have. So you can do it the other way around. But for me,
Holmes is consistent. He's going to give you a chance every time he's out there, whereas Chapman can get off the hook and it's just over. Like you're just losing that game.
I guess if you think of it in that aspect of make him a competitor, yeah, but certainly, I mean, like I had said to you before, like he's been hurt, so I didn't want to count him. But as you had said, the performance wasn't there beforehand. So that's fair. And I guess the only other guy that we didn't mention on this list as far as disappointments has been Trevor Bauer. And that's because of a suspension. And you can argue it all you want, but I just wanted to put him on the list because I saw that his agent had posted something that I saw he was in some type of celebratory picture for July 4th. And I just thought, okay, I got to remember him. Is this going to be something we talk about at all in the off season? What's going to happen? Trying to remember back to what it was like with A-Rod in fantasy and how was that all handled? So anyway, and then Ty, just so we know, if you have one player for your fantasy teams, one guy that you are just like so happy with, whether he was supposed to be that guy all year long or he's no one from nowhere, who has been your favorite major league player that's on one of your fantasy teams?
It's Yordan Alvarez, and it's not even close. Like it's a guy that I've loved forever. And if you go back a couple years and listen, you'll hear me say this guy's going to be great. He's been everything that I thought he was going to be. He sprays the ball to all fields. He's got all kinds of power. I mean, no one's talking about him as the best hitter in baseball yet. They should be. And he has every bit of potential to be that guy. The only thing that stops him from being like a face of the game is his speed. That's it.
Well, he doesn't have any knees.
And he's got no knees to hold him down.
Remember that was the thing, right? Like Alvarez's career could have been over. What was it, 2 years ago? Yeah. There was major.
When you hit it 475 feet, you don't need knees.
You can trot.
That's right. That's what I do in my men's league: swing hard and jog to second.
Well, I'm going to give myself a player too that I roster and polarizing to some, annoying depending on your league settings, but it's Ohtani. If you are in a league whether it's Yahoo and he's split in two, I don't think you're complaining that you've got a hitter and a pitcher as Ohtani is in those leagues where he's two different guys. If you're on Fantrax and your league settings allow Ohtani to score points no matter where you put him, as long as he's in your lineup, he's an asset. He's not the number one player, no matter what your scoring is. He's when he has the ability to do both those things. But he's a top 30 guy, which is exactly what Shohei Ohtani is. But he's just so awesome to have in leagues where you can use him, whether it's the Yahoo split in two or Fantrax where he's doing both. But if it's NFBC where you got to make a choice, or a Fantrax CBS, whatever league where you have to make a choice, he's super frustrating. So it's Ohtani league dependent.
I really thought you were going to say Michael Chavez, but
I don't roster him anywhere. I was looking to pick up some random dudes off waivers, and I was looking through the MVP or not the All-Star type guys. And I'm like, wow, Chavis at second base wouldn't be the worst one. But let's get into the year and let's start talking about the guys that we think are going to be keys to winning teams in August and September. Before we start to bring up the Michael Chavises of the world, because we need to see more at bats. So
yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Great spot to leave it. It's been nice to be back here. We'll continue to get back on the trend here, but until next time, it's been Tyler and Rob here on